recording. Oh, hi. Hi, Book Warriors. We are here with Darynda Jones, Melissa, Diane, Darynda. We're so excited to have you, Darynda, as one of our book club featured authors for May. We all read Bad Day for Sunshine, and we have lots of questions for you.
Good, thank you.
Good. So we had some questions that we came up with, and then also a few readers wrote in some questions that they had. So let's just start with the very easy one of how long have you been an author?
So I have been writing forever. I started writing when I was about 5, or making up stories and everything. I have been an author, published author, so I sold in 2009. I was with Diane, I was part of the Ruby Slipper Sisterhood, which is the RWA Golden Heart finalist for 2009. Ended up selling right after the National Convention, and my first book came out in February of 2011.
Wow, so we kind of published around the same time, but somehow you've gone like this. Like this. That's awesome. Yeah, it's regular people, and then suddenly we have this new career. I think that's very cool. Okay, well, we're just going to kind of go back and forth with some of our other questions. So the first one that we have is, how does it feel to be launching this new series? So you've had the Charlie Davidson series, that's incredibly successful. So now you've got Sunshine. So how did that come about, and how do you feel about that?
Well, what happened was my agent and I were trying to come up with my next project, after Charlie ended. Of course, there's going to be a spinoff and all that, but she kind of wanted me to steer a little more toward the mystery aspect of it. And so we came up with Sunshine in a conversation, like our third conversation, trying to figure it out. And so part of me was really worried that because my readers were so vested in Charlie and they liked paranormal and, all the whole aspect like that they wouldn't follow this new series. But for the most part, they have, and I've gotten such great feedback. I was actually terrified that nobody would ever read me again. But I had such a good time writing Sunshine. I love her. I love these characters. So I'm just thrilled that people have been very open and just really excited about them. So
it's really invigorating to do a new project, right? And to get into a new world.
Always, yeah, always. But I will say I had forgotten. I got really lazy with Charlie. And you guys might attest to this. When you're in a world and you know the world and you know the characters, you don't have to worry about it, and you just jump right in. So starting Sunshine, I had to create the whole, even though it's just regular, it's contemporary, it's based, set in our world. There's nothing mystical about it, or maybe a little tiny bit of mystical, but it was so much harder than I remember. I was like, oh my gosh, just having to come up with everything, make it all new, and try to keep the humor, but trying to not copy Charlie. I was worried that everybody's going to say, well, Sunshine is just Charlie. She's just not paranormal, and yeah. I haven't gotten that, so that's good. But I did get pretty lazy. I realized after starting this, I'm like, I got really lazy. Charlie made me lazy.
Well, because you knew her so well, right? You knew her world. Yeah. So it's kind of like when you have a good friend and you know them, you know exactly what they're going to do. You don't have to think about everything they say or do, because it just comes to you so natural. It's just, you can predict that, and it's so much simpler. So, but I think, kind of going back to your thing about the, paranormal and how this isn't, doesn't have that paranormal element, just that tiny little, things about the dreams. But your humor definitely has carried over. So I think the people who loved the voice, which is, you have such a great voice, that's, I'm sure that's, they're getting their fix on that. So.
Yeah, and that was our goal, is just to try to make it, carry the humor over in the mystery part. And yeah, so hopefully that worked.
Well, I bet you're in the mystery world. Fully in the mystery world with us.
Join us.
Yeah.
Well, we have a list of questions here. One of them kind of has been answered now. We're going to ask about your characters. I'm going to move on to the next one. So one thing that I loved about that you did this book was the point of view stuff. So I like to play a point of view in my thing, so that always catches my attention when an author does that. So your Charlie Davidson's for first person.
Right.
And this is third person, so you switch that. But you also have the alternating points of view between Sunshine and Arnie. So I like that too, the contrast between the mother and daughter. And so could you talk a little bit about that and how you came up with that idea and some things about that mother-daughter perspective? Because I know you have boys.
Yes. Yes, I have boys, little stinkers. So yeah, when I pitched it, so I was literally on the phone with my agent. This was our third phone conversation. We were calling my editors the next day. We had exhausted everything. She rejected, as harsh as that word sounds, but she was just like not really feeling anything that I was pitching. And I pitched everything. I have hundreds of ideas. I probably pitched
process, right? It's part of the thinking it through, having a sounding board, and
yes. And I had pitched everything, and we get down to it, and I was done. I pitched everything, and she said, "I'm not really." She's like, "What else do you have?" And I said, I just panicked, and I remembered this project I had thought of years ago. And I said, I have this one. It's like the Gilmore Girls meets Fargo. And she was like, oh, that's it. And so I was like, wait, really? And she said, yeah, tell me about that. So I had nothing, of course. And I was, the notepad that I had been writing on was there was something like Sunshine Printing or Sunshine something. And I was like, oh, okay, well, it's about a female sheriff, and her name is Sunshine. And, I just made it up on the spot.
Right?
Yeah.
What is it, the usual suspects when he's like looking around the room and tells the whole story? Yeah.
And so, but that was my main thing with that particular project. I remember thinking I really wanted something from the mom's point of view and the daughter's point of view, very much like the Gilmore Girls, which I adore. I love that show. Yes. And so that's why I did that. So then to do that, you can still do first person and switch, the point of views. A lot of people do that. But I was like, no, I'm going to go third and have the different points of views and everything. Well, coming from first person into third, it was like everything sounded wrong. I would write a sentence and I'd be like, that can't be right. That doesn't even sound right. So it was weird. It's like I had to relearn how to write in third person. So it's interesting.
A natural perspective that people, when they're writing, that's kind of their voice and that they just go to their go-to thing. So maybe first person is more your go-to, but you did the third person great.
Yeah. I think it's just what you're used to too, though, because I've written several series in first person, and the one I'm working on now is third person, and I find myself just not even realizing that I slip back to first person. Yeah. And then like, wait, that's not right. Then I have to go back and change, a whole section because it's just.
I did that several times. One of my beta reader, she's my continuity editor. She'd tell me, you slipped here, and I'd be back in first person. So I did the same thing.
Well, you did a great job, and you captured both characters really, really well, I felt.
Yeah. They each had their unique sound.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, so the desert. We talked before we started recording a little bit about the desert. And we felt like it was a really great setting for this. Did you set it there because it's very familiar to you? Did you do that really intentionally because you wanted to impact the mood of the story? What was your thoughts behind that?
And I really had to think about where I wanted it set. My agent wanted it back in New Mexico, which is where my Charlie series is set. And so I wanted a small town, but I wanted particular things in it. And I wanted a small touristy town, but not too big. So I was thinking Taos. If you guys know anything about New Mexico, Taos is very touristy. And then Santa Fe also, but that's a little bigger than I wanted. And so I did all kinds of research. I had no idea that New Mexico had so many small towns, but I couldn't find the exact one I wanted. So I just made one up. So Del Sol is not real. Mm-hmm. It's a fictional town, but I set it where Pecos, New Mexico is, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous area. It's in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The Pecos River runs through it, and it's just a beautiful area. There are ruins there, and it's just so pretty. And it's very close to Santa Fe, which is also beautiful. And yeah, that's why I set it there. So it was for different elements like the touristy part, and also because we have a lot of quirky towns here. And if you've ever heard of Madrid, I thought about setting it in Madrid, New Mexico. And that is a very touristy, it's literally like in the middle of nowhere. And so
is that like Madrid, just pronounced New Mexico?
It's
way like Houston and Houston.
Isn't that so weird? Because it's Madrid here in New Mexico. If you're talking about a person, they're so-and-so Madrid. But if you're talking about the town, the little tiny town, it's Madrid. Nobody knows why. I have no idea. I think it was hippie commune for a very long time, and I think the hippies got involved, and they decided to call it Madrid instead of Madrid. I don't know.
Yeah, they're like, hey, let's go to Madrid.
Exactly. So basically, like Madrid and Taos combined, a set where Pecos is. So if anybody knows anything about New Mexico.
The setting to it, because it's such a, the desert in the summer is very perilous, and winters too with all the snow and everything. I mean, it really added a lot to the story, I think, and gave you a lot to work with probably.
Thank you. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. And what's funny is that it was originally going to come out in, I think, January. Then they moved it to February. Then moved it to April. So I was still hooked on January and February. So I had a big snowstorm come through. And my editor's like, we were kind of thinking more deserty. And I'm like, well, it does snow here. And that was the story that I had. I mean, half of the scenes are set in the snow and in these perilous conditions. Not that the summer is not perilous here, because it is. But, yeah, so I got to keep the snow. And I was like, well, it's kind of your fault. You can't move in the release date.
You get to dispel this whole idea that New Mexico doesn't get snow, right?
Yeah, we do. We have
remember when Becky Turner and I came to Albuquerque to speak to your Romance Writers chapter there, and there was snow. We rode that skylift thing up, and there was snow up there. We had a nice hot toddy on top of the mountain in Albuquerque. That's been years ago, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Wow. Time flies.
Was it your turn or my turn?
Okay, I guess it's my turn again because you were asking about setting, but so kind of getting along those lines, we met through Romance Writers of America, and so that's how we know each other. And even though we both ended up writing mysteries, we also put romance in our books. So Levi Ravender, yum. So can you talk a little bit about crossing the genres, what you like about that, what you enjoy, having who's available, but also a mother that adds, elements to the romance.
I just feel like ever since when I started making up stories when I was 5, and they all have romance. I just cannot write a story without at least a little tiny bit of romance. There's got to be something there. And and then I also realized it was so funny because I was just talking to my husband the other day, and I was telling him that I used to love Scooby-Doo. And he said when he was a kid, he never liked Scooby-Doo. He thought it was so silly. And I'm like, dude, there were mysteries. You didn't like Scooby-Doo. There were mysteries. And I finally realized that all growing up, everything I loved had mystery in it. So I used to watch Perry Mason, way back in the day. I'm dating myself. And Matlock and anything with any kind of mystery or procedural stuff. And so those are my two loves, I guess. I would say those are the top two. I love paranormal stuff too, but I would say mystery and romance.
Do you still gravitate to mystery TV shows?
Oh yeah.
I like Heart to Heart and Beretta.
I watched all the
Rockford Files. I always thought he was cool.
James Garner, yeah.
Watched them all, yeah.
Classics.
Yeah. Okay, so readers are always curious about an author's research process. Did you go talk to, sheriffs and police folk to learn the ins and outs of that, given that Sunshine is, in law enforcement?
Well, I am very fortunate in that a friend of mine who I went to school with is married to our local sheriff.
Oh, that's handy.
I was constantly texting her. I felt so bad, but she'd go, okay, let me ask him, his name's Malin, let me ask him. And just like the silliest things, like why are their uniforms this color? And who gets to choose this? And can he go into a room and do that? Little things like that I'm so clueless about. And so, so I had that resource. I also have one of my readers, Wendy Johnson, she lives in New Mexico, and she was in law enforcement for 23 years. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I got to ask her a bunch of stuff. And both of them read the book before, I think, probably after I sent it to my editor, but they were very early in the process. And they were like, this is wonderful. I did do a lot of research on like a search and rescue, because there's a search and rescue. I had no idea the layers that you have to go through to get a search and rescue started, and so that was interesting. And at that one, I just found a blog, and this man like wrote every single thing, every single point of the process down, and who you report to, who's in charge of the scene. Then it changes later. This person becomes in charge of the scene. Like, it was just so detailed. So, stuff like that, I had to do a lot of research.
Right? What did people do before the internet?
Made stuff up. But yeah, it gave it a great level of authenticity. I think it felt very authentic.
Thank you. Yeah.
I had a question about just about Sunshine being a female sheriff. Did you feel like I love women in non-traditional roles, and did you feel like you had to do anything different because she was female? Being in a non-traditional role like that, or did that not really affect how you wrote things?
I felt like what I wanted was not her doing anything different, but outside people seeing her as a little different, so she does have a couple of misogynistic comments, that come at her. And so I wanted that aspect, because to me, Sunshine feels like, she's been obviously on the police force, and she was a detective for a long time. So she's completely, for the most part, very confident in her role. But yeah, I wanted the outsider's point of view to see how. And I actually really, one of the things that I thought about, I struggled with, well, what about her deputies? Would her deputies treat her different, especially those who had already been there, and she walks onto the scene, and I thought, what, I decided not to go there. I didn't want it to be too antagonistic in the actual department, the office. So yeah. And that was
interesting thing, right?
Oh, do what?
And now just how society is adjusting and stuff, and these things that used to be issues are becoming less of an issue, and how much do we address that in stories, or do we need to address that, because it was interesting. We have a mutual friend, Kim Roberts, who used to be a sheriff's deputy, and I remember when I found that out, when I first met her at a writers conference, I asked her kind of the same question: was there anything that was different about being a female in law enforcement? And she said that it was kind of interesting, because if she'd show up at something where there'd be a bunch of guys maybe having a fight or something, it was kind of like mom showed up and all of a sudden, oh, we're in trouble, and they would sort of back off. And I think there was still that chivalrous notion of you don't hurt a woman. I kind of read that, maybe that was just an undertone of what she was saying, but she said sometimes if another guy shows up, especially if he's a big guy, all of a sudden there's a lot of banging going on, So she didn't put it like that. That was my words. But so I thought that was really interesting that can be. And when I interviewed the IRS agents for my Death and Taxes series, they kind of said that too, that like people would sometimes be more forthcoming with women than they would be with men, and sometimes cry and break down, felt more comfortable showing emotion and maybe spilling their guts than they would to a guy. So so it is interesting that she's a great role model.
Very cool.
She's got that good mix of tough but still feminine, and love that she's a mom.
Yeah. It gives a whole different layer.
Yeah.
And just kind of perspective to her personality and everything that goes with it, and how she balances it all.
And that was perfect for this plot line too, the missing child. That adds another element of she's doing her job, but also as a mother, how would she be feeling about the situation? So that was clever how you wrapped all that together.
So we've already talked about that you started, of course, with the Charlie Davidson series. That's kind of put to bed, and now you have this new series. So what was it like writing this brand new series? I know you talked about, that you were a little bit lazy with the Charlie Davidson series after so many years, right? Did you find that you encountered any surprises as you wrote this series? What else was your experience like with this new thing that you were doing?
Yeah, besides just the whole, having to restart a whole new world and everything, what I found very interesting was that, not interesting, what's it, challenging maybe. I was very worried. I didn't want Sunshine and Ari's voice to be the same. I wanted their voices different. So that was something else. That was another layer that I had to try to kind of pay attention to that quite a bit. And so there was that. And of course it's so fun getting into other characters' heads, writing first person all the time. You don't get to do that. And so I just had a lot of fun being in Ari's head as well. And just trying to think, back, okay. And of course having kids. And I asked my kids a couple of things, I was like, okay, when you were in high school, did you ever do this? Or would a girl do this or whatever? And, they're like, Mom, you're so weird. But yeah, I had so much fun with it. It was a challenge though. And one of the things that I ended up doing, so before I even started it, my editor sent me notes. Okay. I read all of these notes and I memorized them. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And the very last note was, somehow I missed it. I don't know how I missed it, but it was, she felt like that this was Sunshine's story and that Ari would have a smaller role. Well, when I wrote the first draft, it was very much 50-50. And then I send it in, I'm all happy, and I go back to her notes for some reason, and I read that, and I'm like, oh, crap. I just totally messed that up. So I had to...
I'm a teenager.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. I had to write her and I was like, so I messed that up quite a bit. And she was like, yeah. She said, but she read it. She said, no. I said, I still like it. She said, let's just cut it back a little bit. So I actually cut back Ari's role quite a bit. There was a whole other like subplot going on and just different aspects. So the most challenging was with Ari and coming up with her. So basically my editor, okay, I don't want to, can I give spoilers? Is it okay to give spoilers on this?
Yeah, most of the people have already read it.
Yeah, in this, because it's a closed group.
Yeah.
Right. So my editor had problems with Ari being suicidal at 7. She did not want that. And so out of everything that she had me do, that was the one thing that I kind of like, not really argued with, but I was like, well, what if I just toned down the language a little bit? And instead of saying suicide, what if I said take her own life or self-harm or, something like that? She really didn't want that. And I just really did because it's true.
She is, yeah.
Happens, it happens. And I had a friend of mine, I shouldn't say a friend, but one of my readers, her son committed suicide at 10. So I was just like, it happens. And it's not like, I hate trying to make something seem all nice and flowery and wonderful when it isn't always that way. And I was really trying to think about how Ari would feel once she found out, how her mom got pregnant and all that stuff. And of course, which is a whole story arc in itself, and we'll learn all of that later. But so that was tough, and I really I stood my ground. I kind of toned down the language a little bit and made it like baked it up. But I kind of stood my ground on that. So that was tough to try to kind of convince her that it would be okay to include that.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think it makes it more realistic and.
Right.
Kids go through a lot. It's not easy to be a kid. You know, I mean, we tend to act like, oh, childhood is this carefree time. Boy, I think being an adult is so much easier. You have so much more control over things.
Yeah,
and so much. Well, and speaking of Ari, like one thing that crossed my mind is, I know you've written those YA books a while back, is that this kind of has crossover appeal between, an adult audience and a YA audience, really. I mean, was that something you did consciously or unconsciously, or has that even crossed your mind that it's got kind of that broad appeal? Or
it did cross my mind, and it was something that I didn't think it was good or bad. I just thought it is the way it is. It's just gonna be the way it is. So yeah. So and again, if it appeals to a YA audience, I'm all for it. But yeah, it's just kind of what it was. So I just went with it. Yeah.
I mean, I think, that crossover, my daughter and I watched Gilmore Girls together, loved it, both of us still. So I think, you can attract both just a brand new audience or expand your audience by having these two relatable characters. And just an aside before I forget, I loved their texting back and forth. Because I do that with my kids. And so that struck me as really, really authentic.
Oh, yeah.
And, the games they played and, the jokes and things, I thought was great.
Oh, thank you.
And I liked how she wasn't perfect. She was strong and she was looking out for her mom. She was a neat character. I really liked her a lot.
No stereotypical teenager.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's my point. Yeah, she really felt fully formed and very
layered and complex and and interesting
and not secondary. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of why that crossed my mind, is that this really is two really great characters that could appeal to different age groups. But she appealed to me too, so it's like I don't think she's necessarily being a teenager that it has to be a teenager that reads those characters and enjoy her.
Right, because we can enjoy it and respond to it at different levels, like a mother and daughter relationship.
Yeah.
Which is really powerful. It can be very powerful. And to see something that's really positive, a relationship like that, when there's so much, negative things going on in our world, it's nice to have a positive mother-daughter relationship conveyed like that.
So the whole series, we're planning on doing those alternating points of view through the whole series?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yay.
It's just a trilogy right now, so yeah, we'll see. But the main arcs will end it with the third book. So yeah.
Will Charlie Davidson ever pop up in their world?
Well, I did have a little shout out, but probably not. Now, there is a spinoff with June 9th. A Graveyard Shift comes out with 1001 Dark Nights, and that's Garrett's story. So anybody who reads the Charlie books, that's Garrett's story. And then hopefully I will continue with the Beep and Osh, but that's a whole other. And Charlie will be in those. That's where I was going with that. Charlie does show up, just in a different capacity.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Because we had another reader question. So this is from Stephanie. You kind of just addressed it, but she said she was just checking. She saw a reference in A Bad Day for Sunshine from a bartender named Donnie. Said that you used to work at the bar where the owner's daughter could talk to dead people. Was that in reference to Charlie? And so she wants to know, do Charlie and Sam really exist in the same world, in the same universe?
Well, I'm going to say yes, even though they probably won't cross paths. But yeah, so what happened with that was Donnie was in the first book, and I meant for him to be in it. I had him to be a recurring character. And somehow I just kind of lost track of him, and I forgot to bring him back. You know what I mean? So I thought, you know what, then I'm going to bring him back in this and just say he just moved away from Albuquerque because it was just too much for him. And small town normal life. And yeah, so that was my little shout out, my little Easter egg.
I love that. That's so fun for the readers. Yeah. That's awesome.
Nice little treat. I just want to say too, if anybody's heard any weird noises, it's her dog snoring. Our bulldog has made some noises.
Oh, my pug, yeah. He's a pug.
Or pug, sorry.
He's a loud snorer. I guess
I call him a French bulldog. He's not a French bulldog.
I'm so used to him, I don't even hear. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today.
Come out to North Carolina.
Yeah.
Come see our trees and our and our mountains. Come see our mountains.
North Carolina. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.